Hello again. I apologize for taking so long to get back to making videos. Um, I put out my Isle of Dawn videos almost half a year ago, and I did not intend on taking this long to do my next series, but I've been a bit of a slacker. Sorry. Um, but yeah, so at the end of my Isle of Dawn series in the last video, I mentioned how my next series of videos was probably going to be a breakdown of the different classes of Vanguard, because there are a lot of them, and I think they are really well done. Um, they're really well balanced for a game with so many classes, and quite a few of them are very unique and very interesting. Whereas a lot of MMOs nowadays don't put a whole lot of effort into that aspect of it, and instead focus on other areas like making it look really pretty, or stuff like that. But in terms of classes and class design and balance, I think Vanguard is amazing at it. So I really wanted to do a series of videos that focused on the classes to help give people a better idea of what each one is like. So yeah, I'm probably going to do a video on each class, which will be a lot of videos, but hopefully they'll be a little bit shorter than the other ones. So there'll be 15. There are 15 classes in Vanguard. I'm not going to create a new character and do it that way. I'm just here on the character select screen to show you each of the classes here in the menu. I'm probably gonna do the protective fighters first, alphabetically, just because, which means we start with the Dread Knight in this case. So welcome to the Dread Knight class video for Vanguard. The protective fighters, of course, are all tanks, basically. You have your tanks, your melee DPS, your healer classes, and your caster DPS, basically, is the generic breakdown for the four. Or there are four in each except for the tanks. But the four types, those are the four types. So the Dread Knight, like the other tanks, wears plate armor and all that stuff. It's like it says there, the recommended attributes are strength, con, and dex. Your pretty typical melee attributes are the ones you want to focus on. Strength is melee damage, etc. The differences between the three tank types is really their weapon wield preferences. Well, it's not the only difference, but the Dread Knights mainly use two-handed weapons, like it says there in the recommended wield style. The Paladins tend to use a sword and a shield, and the Warriors tend to dual-wield weapons. The recommended attributes are going to be more or less the same. It says Wisdom there for a Paladin, but that's debatable. But the big major difference will be the weapons, the wield preferences for all the three of them, and kind of the way they approach fights. They do the same job, but they do it in kind of different ways, and they have different flavors. In the Dread Knight's case, the Dread Knight, like it says here, is surrounded by fear and despair and makes opponents vulnerable to attack. The Dread Knight is the most casterish of the tanks. They have some pretty big nukes and dots they can throw on whatever they're fighting, and they have a built-in debuff mechanic where just by being in combat with stuff puts a debuff on the mob that they're fighting that ramps up over time as they remain in combat, which is pretty cool. They are also the best soloer of the three tank types. So I have a DK here that I can hop onto. This is my warrior, actually. Where is he? There he is. And I will log into my DK. Now my DK is only level 32. The characters I play for each of these classes is not necessarily going to be max level or anything like that. Just because I don't have access to max level tunes of every class. Several of them will be max level, several will be higher level, most of them will probably be a bit lower. But anyway, yeah, here's my DK. He's level 32, which is just over halfway up the level range, max level being 55. So right off the bat, you can see he's got this big two-handed axe on his back. I forget which one I'm actually wearing. Oh, I have a bunch of crap in my bags here, but I forget which one I'm wearing. Yeah, I'm wearing this, which is the CIS weapon, special requested weapon, which is pretty nice. Great axe. But yeah, so for this, I'll mainly kind of run through sort of the basis of a DK's abilities and kind of what makes them up. I'm certainly not a pro DK by any means, but hopefully I can give you the gist of the class here. Let me just kill this guy since he's going to aggro me anyway. Put on some buffs. I'm handily destroying this monster, and he's not even really hurting me. Okay. So yeah, that was pretty easy. Basically, DKs don't really have much in the way of buffs. These two that I did right off the bat are basically just sort of self buffs. This is a little damage shield kind of self buff, and then they have symbols. They get another type 2. I'm just not high enough level for it, but this gives them a chance to stun opponents that attack you, and it also absorbs incoming damage every few seconds. But that's all they're going to have in the way of real buffs. Well, that and their Devour Strength and Devour Mind, which is a debuff they get for mobs as well. But anyway, yeah, that's basically the DK. They debuff the monsters with like Devour Strength and Devour Mind right here, which takes away monsters' strength and dex and intelligence and wisdom and gives them to the DK for a short period of time. And then the ramping debuff, which DKs innately get. You can see the little marks here. I'm at level 2, which is Wave of Despair. Incoming criticals on the mob are increased, resistances are reduced, and incoming spiritual damage. And the higher that bar gets, I killed him. But the higher the rank of the debuff, the more debuffed that mob is. The potency of that debuff increases the longer you're in combat, up to rank 5, which is a pretty neat mechanic. And all the basic attacks increase Dreadful Countenance, which is what that debuff is called. I can show you in the... actually, it may not be in the book. I don't think it is. But anyway, it's called Dreadful Countenance, and it's just built into the Dread Knight class. It's really nice. But other than that, the DK of the tanks, the DKs are easily the best soloers. They have means of self-healing. They have lots of life taps, like Harrow drains life equal to 200% of your melee damage. Cull is a spell-casted version that drains health. Scythe of Doom is a frontal AoE life tap melee attack, which will hit up to 6 opponents in front of you. So you can heal off of multiple monsters that you're fighting at the same time. They have lots of tools, light little life tap tools and stuff like that. And then in addition to their basic melee attacks like Vexing Strike and Malice, Mutilate, which is kind of a big hitting melee attack, they also have a bunch of spells like Torture, which is damage and hate over time that they can put on a monster. Throw some melee attacks in there. With these are counters that pretty much all the tanks get, but I successfully block something so I can use a counter attack. And then I can, to use Harrow, which is I'm not very hurt right now, but I can use Harrow, but it's only usable from behind the target, so I can pair it with Shadow Step, heal myself, and do damage. And you'll see Harrow heals you for 711 hit points. Pretty neat tools. That's a named right over there. Let's see if I can go kill him. He's a 3-dotter. Might be interesting. Let's see how this goes. spell life tap. Oh, he hurts. He's definitely named. I think I might beat him though, if things continue on this way. Yeah, there we go. And I got a hat, which is not any good for me, but whatever. So yeah, anyway, that's just a pretty quick example right there of just a DK soloing ability. Various dots. I didn't use this. Is Word of Doom is the big nuke that they have, which is spiritual damage, and Dreadful Visage helps increase their Dreadful Countenance faster. Basically, they debuff whatever they're attacking. They steal stats from it, and they have a lot of both melee attacks and spells which they can use, and then they have quite a few life tap abilities to keep themselves alive, which makes them very potent soloers. So apart from soloing, the Dread Knights are of course tanks and will find themselves tanking for groups and later on in raid situations and stuff like that if you're so inclined to want to raid at high level. In those kind of situations, DKs are also very, very good because they can generate a lot of hate, and they make excellent tanks for the DPS in your group to really DPS without worrying about getting themselves killed. In most of those situations, the DK doesn't really have to worry too much about healing themselves, unlike when soloing, because usually you'll have a healer in the group, so you can really focus on dishing out the damage and holding aggro. I've noticed one of the common mistakes a lot of newer players to Vanguard do when they're playing a tank class is they may be used to a lot of other games where tanking is very, very different than here in Vanguard. In many other games, the tanks don't really have to worry all that much about losing aggro. Once they have it, and there's really almost nothing that can happen to take it away from them. I know in EQ, long time ago, Warriors had a taunt ability that it wasn't guaranteed, but it was a pretty good chance to instantly move them to the top of the hate list, no matter where they were when they used it, which of course made it relatively trivial to hold aggro. And then, of course, later on people were making jokes about, yeah, just put the warrior in a corner and have him attack, and then you can get up and go make a sandwich and you'll hold aggro. Nothing like that happens in Vanguard. Aggro is most definitely a group effort, or a raid effort. The DPS actually have to be careful not to pull it, and they have to use their de-aggro abilities. The tanks really have to work to hold their aggro, and it's not just through taunts and other things like that. DKs of course have a taunt. It's called, the DK one is called Provoke here, and it increases your opponent's hatred of you. But really, tanks in Vanguard have to use everything that's available to them in order to hold their aggro. Tanking is not just about generating hate through hate abilities, it's about dealing damage and generating hate that way as well. The DK defensive stance, which of course is what you're going to tank in, it adds mitigation, and it also adds 50% hate per attack. It's got a 50% aggro modifier on it. So doing damage is the best way to hold aggro, is to just really beat the crap out of whatever you're attacking. In addition to, of course, taunting. You don't want to neglect that part. But you really, if you're trying to hold aggro on a monster, you just want to hurt it. And that's really the best way to hold aggro, is to just beat the crap out of it. Like this chain I'm using right here is Rack and Ruin. It's a DPS chain. It does 400% weapon damage. And they have this chain, which is which deals damage and increases your opponent's hate. In most cases, the DPS chain is going to build you more hate than the hate chain, if you're in defensive stance. Now, this chain definitely has its uses. There are plenty of situations where you want to build hate without doing that much damage. Off-tanking, stuff like that. If you're off-tanking something that you don't actually want to die, but you want to, hold it off to the side or something, it's a great ability to use. hate over time, all kinds of stuff like that. But really, DKs they make excellent tanks because they can put out damage. This is both damage and hate over time. This is a big nuke that they can use. This is a big melee attack that you can use. They have a 400% weapon damage chain that they can open up. They're debuffing the mob while they're attacking it. They're through Dreadful Countenance and debuffing it through Devour Strength and Devour Mind, which they do get upgrades to later on. And all sorts of stuff like that. And they have AoE aggro, so they can hold aggro on multiple mobs in a group. Now, the AoE stuff is really expensive. 46 endurance for Black Wind, which is their AoE hate frontal, and then 48 for Scythe of the Doom, which is, of course, the AoE life tap. So the DK has pretty high endurance costs. They can mitigate this somewhat by using Ravaging Darkness, which they also use, which drains endurance from the monster and gives it to them over 8 seconds, which lets them really spam some of their higher endurance abilities. I believe Ravaging Darkness 1 is gotten at level 18. Yeah, level 18 for Ravaging Darkness 1. So once a DK hits level 18 and they get Ravaging Darkness, they can really start to use these high cost attacks and bring out the full potential of the DK. Before then, it's probably a little rough. I remember it being a little bit rough being able to afford using these because they're so high cost. But once you get Ravaging Darkness, you can chain them together and the DK really comes into its power. As a soloer especially, and then of course in groups when you can spam abilities for endurance, you can really hit mobs and generate the hate. So, but yeah, that's kind of the basic rundown on DK. Again, this is my first class breakdown video, so hopefully that wasn't too unorganized, and hopefully it gave you a decent idea of kind of how the combat for a DK works, or at least the soloing part. I'm not going to get in a group or anything, but I just soloed a couple mobs real quick and that kind of thing. I'm not going to go through the list and list each ability. You can do that if you're going to look at a DK, but they're primarily, like I've said, debuffs or Dreadful Countenance utilities. Dreadful Countenance being the built-in debuff that the DK has that ramps up. Life taps in the form of Harrow for melee or Cull for the caster one. Big melee attacks as well as big nukes. Word of Doom, big spiritual nuke. Later on at like level 50, they'll get Bane, which I know of, which is a real big nuke that actually sacrifices their Dreadful Countenance level to hit really hard. So that one comes later. Also at level 50, I know DKs get an ability called Hatred Incarnate, which doubles their damage for 30 seconds, and as well as cuts all their endurance costs in half for the duration. So once you hit level 50 on a DK, and you activate Hatred Incarnate, and you're doing double damage for 30 seconds with halved endurance costs. So you're really spamming out abilities at double damage, which is crazy. It's great for both DPSing and if you're on a raid mob and you open up with Hatred Incarnate and beat the crap out of it for 30 seconds with double damage running, you're going to have pretty good aggro. So they've got a lot of nice tools for that kind of stuff, for really doing damage of multiple types, both melee and spell, and as well as the debuffs on the mob. And then they're good soloers as well because of their life tapping mechanics that they have. So overall, the DKs are very good class. They make good tanks. They're a little more solo friendly than the other tanks. If you know you're going to solo a lot, but you want to play a plate tank class, DK would probably be the best one to pick. Paladins can solo, but they do it very slowly, and warriors are really not very good at soloing at all. They're all very good tanks, and they do the job very well, but in different ways. But in terms of soloing power, DKs definitely have the edge. So yeah, that's kind of the basic breakdown of the Dread Knight. Once again, I apologize if it was a little random, but But yeah, that's more or less the way the abilities work. I'll do a quick run through here on gear. It's pretty basic tank gear. You know, the stats, strength, con, and dex, like it recommended on the character select screen, are really the ones you mostly want to focus on. Strength is by far the most important tank stat and DPS stat, just because it increases both your damage and your block chance for a tank. Constitution is hit points and resistances. Obviously, you want those as a tank. And dexterity is melee critical bonus, which is very important as well. And parry chance and chance to completely resist a spell, and range damage bonus, which is not quite used as much, but is still important for pulling and stuff like that. Whereas the more caster stats, even though the DK is a bit, it has nukes, they're a little less important. I have seen DKs put some points into intelligence to increase their spell damage. I don't know really how effective that is. They've said it works pretty well, but most of the DKs I know just kind of stick with the strength dex con build, or the strength con dex build, I should say, for optimal performance. But you can do whatever you want. It's not like you'll be totally gimping yourself if you don't go that. But this is probably the best in terms of min-maxing that you're gonna get. But other than that, you know, just build tank gear, strength and hit points and armor class and stuff like that. You know, you find yourself a nice two-hander to use with good damage on it, and you should be good to go. So yeah, I think that probably wraps up the DK video. Please let me know if there's anything that I can improve on. As I go through these, I'm sure I will get better at it. But and also let me know if you have any questions. I would be happy to answer them in the comments or in subsequent videos. But for now, thank you, and I will see you next time where I cover the Paladin.